So I think we can start. And good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are connecting from, and welcome to this event. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Martina Pasquini, and I'm the B Academics Chair of the Events Committee. For those of you who are not who are new to our community, B Academics is a global network of educators and researchers working to advance the teaching practice and the research study of for business as force of good. We are very excited today to kick off our event, B Academics and Strathmore University Research Workshop, because this is our first 2023 event. The event has been greatly organized and led by our chair of the Global Engagement Committee, Veronica Devenin, with Dr. Mumbi Wachira, lecturer at Strathmore University, and also the academics member. Our event today is focused on the African context with a special aim of raising an awareness for B Corporation and sustainable business in this specific institutional context. The agenda of today is rich, okay? So the event consists of 4 parts. The first focus on the role of B-Lab Africa. The second is more teaching oriented. The third will tackle the challenges of research in African context. And the final part is a colloquium where the audience will be divided into 4 breakout rooms, each one chaired by the different member. And so feel free to join and jump in out from the breakout room that you prefer. But I don't want to take too much time, so I leave the words to Mumbi Wachira, lecturer at Strathmore University and B Academic members, and to Joe Gaiman, Vice President of B Academics and professors at George Washington University School of Business. Thanks again for being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Martina. And I think I'm representing Professor Ismail Atia, who will join us as we go along. But my part here is just to welcome everybody who has joined in on behalf of the university and to acknowledge, the great opportunity that we have working together on this with B Academics. From the perspective of the university, and I see several of my colleagues here, that's very good. Thank you for joining as well. From our perspective, we really work to see how to support doctoral candidates, some of who are also faculty within the university. So I think this is a unique opportunity that we have just to learn from the network, the academics, the research that people are carrying out, best practices around teaching, and of course for people to receive feedback on their work. I'll also just say briefly that this year we have a sustainability theme in the university, and I think that this seminar really aligns with that shared purpose that the university has in promoting sustainability in education, research, and in the several activities that we do. So welcome. Once again, I'm really looking forward to discussing and learning more from everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I just want to add a few words of welcome as well, but let me start by thanking all of the organizers. So this event has been a while in planning, and a lot went on behind the scenes to make this happen. I want to start with Veronica Devenin, who has really led the global outreach efforts for B Academics, and her committee is the one that makes these events possible. This is our first event on the continent of Africa, and I think it's really exciting for us. I want to also thank Mumbi Wachira, who has really been just an enthusiastic partner through all of the organizing efforts, going back to almost a year ago when we started planning this event. And Martina Pasquini has, as the head of our events, has done an awesome job of making sure we're all organized and, all the infrastructure is here. We started as a sort of a loose collection of academics back in 2016, and formally incorporated as a nonprofit in 2019. Speaking for myself, I've actually been studying B corporations since 2013, and it's really just exciting to see what the community is up to. I'm also heavily involved in the Academy of Management and other academic societies, and I think one of the greatest things we get to do as research faculty is, sort of share the joy of doing research with, with new scholars. And I think today's event is really intended to, build additional capacity, with up and coming researchers who are interested in these kinds of issues of business as a force for good, B corporations, the sustainable development goals. And so I'm just excited that we're all here and looking forward to interacting with all of you today. And with that, I want to go ahead and formally pass this over to Fred, who's going to kick off our part one.
Thank you, Joel. I appreciate that. If you'll allow me, I will share my screen. There are a few pointers that I put together to share with everyone this afternoon in Nairobi, Kenya. So like mentioned, my name is Fred Mushina, Works 2. I am the Business Development Manager at BLab Africa. New to the organization, but not new to the concept of sustainable business and having a keen eye on impact-driven business. So if I could speak a little bit about the evolution of business, what I'd like to have this session as is basically BLab Africa 101. It was to give a bird's eye view of what BLab Africa does and why we exist. So in the 20th century, we observed a prevalence of shareholder capitalism. The question that was often asked was, what is good for the shareholder? And of course, that comes down to dollars and cents. The result was an extractive, exclusive system of which focus was solely on maximizing profit. Now, come the 21st century, we seek a shift to stakeholder capitalism, where, if I may borrow the term, all stakeholders matter. The result, which we intend to achieve, is businesses taking a stand to become regenerative, inclusive, and benefit multiple stakeholders within the ecosystem that they operate in. So BLab Africa, which was prior to December of 2022, known as BLab East Africa, with a splinter in South Africa, which is known as a market builder, for those that are familiar with the terms. BLab Africa as a unit was founded in 2007 and is a non-profit behind the global certification of B Corp. We envision an inclusive and equitable and regenerative economic system for all people on the planet. I think the best and most loose definition of BLab Africa is advocates for change in the way that business is conducted in Africa. Globally, we have a community of in excess of 6,000 certified B Corps that span across 159 industries. This is across 89 different countries, but the unifying goal remains one and the same, which is the B Corps are accelerating a global culture shift to redefine success in business and build a more inclusive and sustainable economy. Now, closer to home in Africa, we have a total of 58 B Corps, the majority of which are located in Eastern and South Africa. We have a total of 36 in East Africa and 11 in South Africa. This heavy bias is due to the reason I mentioned earlier, that we had initially established as BLab East Africa and have grown to spread the B Corp movement across Africa in Q1 2023. Now, I'd like to mention just a few B Corps that we have in Africa, and I've tried to make this list as as random as possible. One noteworthy B Corp that we have is called Latitude Craft Chocolate in Uganda. For those that are familiar with the cocoa and general chocolate industry, they've been complaints from time immemorial about the labor to compensation to the entire value chain of the chocolate industry. This is one player who has come in within the East African context to try and change this narrative. The second would be Green Spoon Limited, one of our more active B Corps in Kenya, who specializes in grocery shopping solutions. Now, what they do is that that is most noteworthy is have a huge, a very huge focus on small-scale farmers that generally would have been overlooked by your bigger supply chain chains. The third would be Kazi Yetu, Tanzanian and German social enterprise based in Germany, promoting local value addition to agricultural products in Tanzania. And I'll shift really fast to Mr. Green Africa, who are based in Kenya, and they're the first recycling company to be certified, B Corp certified on the African continent. They deal with collection and conversion on selling of post-consumer plastics. Now, I will make available these slides, and they all have a link at the naming area that you can go into and find out a little bit more about the company and have a view at the submission for the business impact assessment. Now, as any choice on any business choice is presented, the obvious question would be, why should I get B Corp certified? We have boiled this down to 6 key factors that appeal most to the African market. The first is joining a global community of leaders. As is well known, the B Corp movement is a global movement, and it gives innovative and early adopters in Kenya the opportunity to being a thought leader, to be ahead of the curve in terms of the way they conduct business. The second is raising capital. Now, we have seen exponential increase in impact investment and recognition of social responsibility as a consideration in funding, especially within the African context. It generally gives the investor the confidence that companies have a long-term orientation. The third is networking and benchmarking access through a variety of activities that we carry on. We also are, B Corps are also given access to our networking system, our networking platform termed Beehive, and they can then get in contact with any other B Corps and come up with collaborations with like-minded individuals. The fourth is a globally recognized certification that we've talked about, this being a third-party assessment and recognition that is not internally generated. It gives credence to the name of a company. The fifth is attraction of talent. Data has become readily available in the African market, and job seekers alike are not blind to this. So we have found a direct correlation between how well a company operates in terms of how much they care about their entire ecosystem and how attractive they are to talent within the market. It's also worth highlighting that one of the verticals that we assess during B Corp certification is the aspect of workers, how well they are compensated, how satisfied they are with their work conditions, and a myriad of other factors that tie into this. So this builds to attraction, increasing the attractive index of a company to talent. And the last but not least is attraction of market. The consumer is becoming a lot more informed about the practices of companies, be it in production or in logistics or getting the product to market. We are all familiar with the incidences of labor problems in Southeast Asia, for example, or the success story of Tommy's, the shoes that were 100% organic. And I think at one point had a campaign where you'd buy one pair of Toms and another pair of Toms would be donated to a deserving human being. Or the story of Body Shop with their humane cosmetics and the fact that they do not They do not test their products on any animals or have any harmful ingredients. So this knowledge automatically brings forth the product attractive index to customers. Okay, sorry about that, but I will continue. From a research perspective, I would definitely, the first line that I would draw would be the obvious, would be the intersection between business and sustainability. Can you be sustainable and still be profitable? The business case of impact-driven business, so to speak. The second rough research theme area would be the efficacy of certification without lobbying or policy change. The fact that we have certification, is that enough, or should we drive further up the value stream to create actual changes in regulation or policy? The third would be dynamic certification versus graduated certification. And for this, I mean that I refer to the question whether standards should be driven by a participatory approach, or they should be unilaterally developed by a perceived panel of experts. Should we have B Corp 1.0 and then move on to B Corp 2.0 once someone has achieved the 1.0 certification? So these are general thematic areas that I think would benefit from a little bit of more research and increasing the knowledge pool from different experts. Therein ends my presentation, and I thank you very much for the opportunity afforded for me.
Thank you very much, Fred. Very insightful. Now we pass to the section of the teaching section to share best teaching practices, and I introduce Veronica Devenin, our chair of the Global Engagement Committee, who will moderate the session.
Thank you, Martina, for that. Well, our first speaker is Mumbi Washira. You already know her. I don't think I have to introduce her again. Thank you so much, Mumbi, for sharing with us your presentation about an African perspective to responsible management education. Just before hand you to Mumbai, remember that you can post your questions into the chat so we can discuss your questions later. Okay, so Mumbai, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Veronica. And I think, I have to say I'm speaking from the perspective of someone who is, based in a business school, and I know we are coming also from different fields and backgrounds. So I do hope this will be relevant. And as always, if there's something which is unclear, or as Veronica said, if you have a comment or a question, please feel free to type in the chat. So, this is really something which is very close to my heart. And I think when we're reflecting about, what do we mean by responsible management education, I think Professor Bansal, she is someone who I admire quite a bit and follow a lot. She's a professor of strategy at Ivy. And, this captures the essence of what that means. It's looking at the business school and by extension, the university as an institution that drives positive societal impact and change, and trying to find solutions to the problems that we are currently facing, especially now in our context. So most of the examples I'm going to give are things that I've done in my class to actually teach different people across, the spectrum, whether they're in business, whether they're undergraduate students, just what are the challenges for Africa today, and how do we then solve them from the perspective of business. So I think first, it just helps, again, I think, and this may not be very clear, but I think it just helps sometimes to understand, what really are we facing here in our, on our continent, which we love so much. And really, we have several sustainability problems, okay? Whether we're talking about food insecurity, high levels of poverty and inequality, the contraction in our economies. Yeah, and I think, for the Kenyans in the room, I know there are other people who are also joining from other places, yeah? But I think we are really feeling the economic crunch at the moment, and we're also experiencing drought since last year. So these are very pressing problems, and they're immense. So I'm not also, saying that we are, the solvers of all these issues, but we do then need to think about, the way we teach and educate. Is it actually exposing people to the problems that we have? And also, again, hopefully, giving them ways in which they can actually solve them. So these are just some ideas I have. And, I don't really have a structured way in which I have been doing this over, excuse me, over the years. But they're just, some things I've seen which are helpful. So I am an accounting lecturer, and I teach mostly in the graduate programs, but also in undergraduate on occasion. And there, typically, the topics would be around, management accounting, financial reporting. So the typical, business-related issues. So I've found that when it comes to management accounting, yes, we will go through the typical syllabus of budgeting, costing methods, but I'll also, when we get to the section around performance measurement for businesses, I throw in ESG metrics in there. Okay, so that people will then get a kind of a very preliminary understanding of non-financial measures of performance, and sometimes it opens a much wider and more instructive conversation with the students. When it comes to even issues to do with, say, corporate fraud, forensic accounting, which I also, teach and enjoy a lot, we can talk about the typical Enron or WorldCom, but I also include those cases where we've had massive environmental damage as a result. So whether it's Volkswagen's emission scandal or British Petroleum Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So this again gives, the participants in the course an understanding that scandals don't only have governance issues or impacts to think about, they can also, create a lot of problems for the environment and the society. I've also found, again, another course I teach is sustainable finance. Again, as I said, I'm just giving examples of what I do practically. So one of the cases, and I know we have our South Africans in the room, one of the cases which I found very useful is to go through ESCOM. So ESCOM, for those who don't know, is the main energy facility in South Africa. So how I would typically approach this, just to walk people through, very briefly, is just to explain the context. So just to understand that, okay, we're talking about more than half actually of the people living here in Africa lacking access to electricity. Okay, so the thing is that the emission reduction targets, but then there are our energy needs that we have. And there's a question around, when it comes to renewable energy, clean energy, do we actually have the resources to actually transition, away from fossil fuels to more renewable sources of energy for all our people? And what happens to stranded assets? So, again, if there are Nigerians here, people also from southern parts of the continent, oil is a huge contributor to GDP. So when we say we are no longer going to be relying on that, what then is the alternative? What are the social issues related with transitioning to net zero, as we like to say? So we usually have very interesting discussions in the class about that. And people have, very strong opinions, I have found, okay? So it's more or less just to give them an overview that more or less this is our context, this is the problem. Now, how do we actually move forward? Okay, so they then get to start thinking, applying that systems thinking, which we talk about so much when it comes to sustainability, which is there's an economic effect of something, but there's also the social repercussions as well. Yeah. And I found this very useful sometimes to discuss. And I think also, again, because I'm speaking with colleagues, I think, I'm challenging myself and yourselves, let us write these case studies and put them out there, and we can use them in our teaching as well, because I really think there are a lot of good studies that come from Harvard Business School, IB, and others, but we do also need to say our stories. And I would like to say, I think there are many examples of how different schools, I think especially in South Africa, are doing that. If it's talking about business innovation, and again, this also blends in business, it blends in IT, but just understanding that, we can also use very local examples like M-Pesa to talk about, what business innovation can look like when it works well. So I think, for those who don't know about M-Pesa, it's a mobile money platform that enables financial services for a vast portion of the population. And why it's impactful is because it's really helped to bridge the gap when it comes to financial inclusion for our people. And that's a very good, case study. Again, it is still telling people this is a typical business that was created, but then it's meeting a fundamental social need. The other aspect, or another thing which I sometimes talk about is, resilience in value chains. So again, this is a recent story that, came out recently. This is Margaret Nyamumbo, I believe. She is the CEO of a company called Kahawa 1893, which means coffee 1893. And she's based in San Francisco, but their coffee is grown here in Kenya. And what she has done with the company is to enable consumers to tip farmers directly when they buy the coffee. And this is mostly because most of the coffee that is sourced in Kenya and most countries here, if they're able to grow coffee, it's mostly women who are the ones picking it, picking the coffee bean. And they do not actually own the land. They do not actually sometimes get fairly compensated by the companies and the factories. So again, she's created this mechanism where, this can be done directly by the consumer. So it's still a business issue, a business approach to doing things, but then you add in that element of responsibility, sustainability. And there are many other examples, because I see there are questions in the chat and I will address them, but I'll just, go through this, which is, sometimes it helps to even bring somebody else into the room. And I know we are very familiar here with giving guest lectures. So sometimes I challenge people, if you're teaching a class in investments and portfolio management, then maybe invite an impact investor. And in East Africa especially, we do have a very, I would say, very good impact investment activity landscape. There are lots of companies, who would be really happy to come and talk about their impact investing strategies. Yeah. Also acknowledging that some subjects already have these ideas in place, whether you're talking about business ethics, you're probably already conducting or you're doing responsible management education. Sometimes we may not call it sustainability, we may call it something else, but it's still relevant. And then also involving students as much as possible. So I've talked about this before in, I think it was last year, the year before actually, in ABI Academics Forum. So this is a program that we co-created with Absa Bank, and actually Bila Africa was our, and still is our partner. And the program was created for Absa's suppliers to understand the basics of, business or corporate sustainability. So we formulated that as a business school, but we also brought in students who were able to implement some of the ideas practically for the farms who had actually gone through this program. So again, it's just seeing sometimes the learning may be outside the classroom because this is something that they had to do extra, but then also, you know, they were compensated for this, the students, and they also got a lot of industry experience from this engagement. So just in closing, it really is just seeing that there are opportunities given where we are coming from to weave in these ideas of responsible management. For example, if it's consumer studies, you know, whether it's thinking about, you know, what kind of impact are we having when it comes to buying decisions, or even using a documentary. Again, you know, I'm just talking from my own observations of what has been happening recently, but we've seen that BBC documentary. I think most of us who are here have seen it, about the true cost of our tea and how workers are treated on farms. You know, so that's also a very good opportunity to bring into discussion this aspect about when we're talking about value chains, what do we really need to be thinking about? There's ethics, there's economics, you know, understanding that sometimes the economic models we have, you know, to determine various things leave out a lot of matters which actually should be priced in, so to say. So these are just some ideas that I've been having. And of course, not to leave out the lawyers in the room, because I mean, even in Kenya, there's a lot of movement when it comes to environmental policies or climate policies. And it's just also to find ways to weave that into what we teach. But I think I'll stop here and leave room to answer questions or to give, you know, comments as we go along. Thank you. Back to you, Veronica.
Thank you so much, Mumbi. Really interesting. And I can recognize the need of more local cases as well. No, we have the same discussion here in Spain, for example. Well, now I'm going to hand you over to Jessica Yinka Thomas. She's a professor at North Carolina State University, and she's our executive director at B Academics. Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vero. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Mumbi, thank you so much for kicking off this session with, I think, a really exciting, survey of the range of different ways that you're embedding sustainability, purpose, impact across the curriculum in the classroom, outside of the classroom. So I'm excited to share with everyone here another approach to really connecting students to connecting students with B Corps, the broader business as a force for good movement through an experiential learning model called B Impact Teams, which was developed by B Lab. As Veronica mentioned, I am an assistant professor of the practice in the Department of Management, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship in the Poole College of Management at North Carolina State University. I'm also one of the founders of B Academics, along with Joel, who you heard from earlier, and Rosanna Garcia, who's still working with us in spirit, the first president of B Academics, and now the executive director of B Academics. And I wanted to start my presentation today with a little bit more of a personal introduction that I'm used to doing, because I want to share with all of the participants how B Academics has its roots in Africa, and also to connect and to really make the connection between B Academics and this exciting partnership with Strathmore University as we think about how can we all learn from academics, from the B Corp movement across the continent, and how can we identify opportunities to collaborate and learn from each other and share best practices. And so I want to start out by saying that I have been studying this concept of business as a force for good for almost 50 years now. In this picture, this on the right is my father, Dr. Adebisi Babatunde Thomas from Nigeria. On the left is my mother, Marianne Thomas, from the US. My father was an economics professor for most of my experience growing up. My mother was a computer scientist. I grew up in Nigeria and in Senegal in West Africa. And my father was studying, really looking at entrepreneurship and innovation as a strategy to address the challenges that we face across Africa and really around the world. And I think it's really, this partnership with Strathmore is particularly interesting and exciting because for 10 years, my father was the head of the United Nations Development Program in Kenya. And actually worked very closely with Strathmore University in that role as UNDP Res Rep. And so when he passed away 5 years ago, Strathmore actually created an Adebisi Babatunde Memorial Lecture Series, recognizing my father's work. And this is just an announcement of that first lecture in that series, Transforming Africa Through Action, Women and Youth Entrepreneurship Dialogue. And so I just share that background to say that as with many of the innovations around the world, Be Academics, my role in Be Academics, I think brings that perspective of my growing up in Africa, of my learning from my father all of this time. And I think this is just an incredible full circle here with this collaboration. And so I'm excited for this dialogue. And so my work very much focuses, as we're talking about kind of this opportunity to teach and engage and transform, right, our education system globally, to transform the purpose and the role of business, which has really been my passion for all of my career. And it's been really focused on getting outside of the classroom, engaging with students, inspiring, educating, informing them to help prepare them to think about the role that they can play in addressing the great social and environmental challenges that we face as a global community. And so I've been studying, teaching about, working with B corporations for almost 14 years now, and wanted to share with you that as an educator, I haven't seen anything that has gotten my students as excited about their power and their potential as when I teach about B corporations and this global movement, right, of people using business as a force for good, engaging companies, engaging as we're doing, right, academics, students around the world in this unifying vision and message. And so, I want to share with you here one specific example of how we've been using the B Impact assessment as a teaching tool. And I think it is particularly relevant in an academic context because B Lab developed this B Impact assessment as a teaching tool for companies. Right? It's not just an assessment. It's not just a certification. It's really a roadmap for companies, right? To think about how they can drive impact across their stakeholders. I think that makes it a particularly powerful teaching tool in the classroom as well, because this is a tool that is comprehensive. So as we're talking about stakeholder governance in our classrooms, right, it really provides a broad, right, overview of the positive impact that companies can have across stakeholders, right? It looks at a very aspirational, right, approach to business, looking at really where the opportunities for business to have an impact. It's adaptive, right? So there are different versions of the assessment around the world in different languages that take into consideration different sizes of business, location, sectors, as well as different cultural contexts, and looks at both core business operations. As a strategy professor, this is important for me, but also, right, the impact business model, other opportunities for companies to really be able to drive impacts. And so about 8 years ago, B Lab developed this new model of experiential learning called B Impact Teams, which is essentially the idea of bringing together students to work with aspiring and certified B corporations on consulting projects, experiential learning projects, to help companies make progress, right? Not just towards certification, but really make progress. Here, I'm going to jump ahead, really make progress on, right, this B Impact assessment measures companies, at least right now in the current version of the assessment. We're going to see some big changes to the assessment coming in the next year or two. But right now, this assessment measures companies from 0 to 200. And so this B Impact Teams model provides an opportunity to work with companies anywhere across this spectrum. So whether companies are starting out at 5 or at 10 and are really just beginning their journey, right? There's an opportunity to work with those aspiring B Corps on impact improvement projects, maybe focused on specific sections of the assessment. Maybe they want to focus on their environmental impacts and their impact on their workers, but just to help move them along this journey. But it also provides an opportunity to work with companies that have committed, that are making a commitment to certifying as a B Corp, that want to get over that 80-point threshold, as well as an opportunity to work with certified B corporations on recertification if they want to be best for the world, so among the best of B Corps in a certain area, if they want to focus on their commitment to the climate collective challenge, that they want to focus specifically on issues related to diversity and inclusion, or even if they want to continue to improve their impact beyond 80, they want to, right, continue to focus on impact improvement. So this B Impact assessment and this B Impact teams model provides an opportunity to work with students really wherever they are on their impact assessment journey. So we've started our own version of the B Corp clinic here at North Carolina State University called the B Corp Clinic. We've worked on 99 projects with almost 500 students, driving almost 3,000 points of impact across the B Impact assessment. And this B Corp clinic is just one of a number of B Impact teams that are being run really across the US and increasingly around the world. And so here are just a few examples of some of the other B Impact teams programs. And we're actually collecting data through B Academics on over 27 different B Impact teams models around the world, because this is a framework, this is a model that can be easily adapted and replicated in different academic contexts. And so we have some programs that are run out of business schools, some programs that are run out of various colleges and programs. We have some programs that are co-curricular, so are sitting outside of the classroom, other programs that are embedded into an academic course. And so this is a very flexible and adaptable model. Our B Corp clinic at NC State is actually part of a Sustainable Business Strategy practicum course that I teach. And I think it's really well aligned with the B Impact assessment framework. We do a series of introductory models, really laying the groundwork in defining sustainability in business and exploring sustainability as a driver for entrepreneurship and innovation, but also modules focused on essentially in alignment with different sections of the B Impact assessment. So looking at sustainability and supply chain management, marketing, employee engagement, and finance and impact investing. And throughout the course, teams of students are working with companies everywhere from startup companies to multinational companies across a range of different industries and sectors on these B Corp clinic consulting projects with real world companies. And we're working with companies around the world in this clinic. In fact, this semester, we're working with a travel and tourism company that's based in Sydney, Australia. Really, the course builds on a series of learning materials, guest lectures, discussion forums, and then eventually builds into this practicum, the B Corp clinic. And so just in closing, I want to share that as part of our work with B Academics, we're developing a range of tools and resources to both identify other best practices, like we just heard from Mumbi, in teaching about sustainability, responsible business, B corporations, and in working with companies and engaging with businesses, but also looking to share those best practices. And so here's just a snapshot from our engagement portal, where we're pulling together those resources. And one of the resources we're sharing is actually a workshop that I host, where we work with academic institutions around the world to learn from how they're engaging with students around B Corps, but also to share this B Impact Teams model. And so I want to open this up as an invitation to all the participants We would love to B Lab Africa, we would love to work with more African companies in our B Corp clinic and think about how we can engage companies from across the continent. And with all the educators out there, if this is an interesting model that you'd like to learn more about, would love to have a conversation about how we can learn from the work that you're doing, but also discuss how we might be able to think about how we can adapt this B Impact Teams model to the African context. So I'll close out the formal presentation so we have plenty of time for Q&A and for discussion. But again, really excited for this conversation, this collaboration, and excited to see where we'll go from here.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing this experience with us. We have a comment and question from Nurwin. I don't know if you want to share it directly, but basically she's asking how we can handle some gaps, like how to gain more mentorship from senior researchers, institutional collaboration. I don't know, Nurwin, do you want to?
Oh, Nurwin, maybe. Okay, maybe because I can see it, and maybe just take a stab. And thank you, Nurwin, for that question, because it's captured our issues very well. Or Nurwin, you want to comment maybe before I go ahead? You're unmuted.
Good afternoon. In Kenya, it is quite mid-afternoon, and good morning to those ones who are in the morning. My basic issue is that for the young academicians where most of us are coming in, or the young researchers, and especially in the business field, we are having a number of challenges. And these challenges, I'm sure, are cutting across a number of African institutions. And I think that is why my colleague from Strathmore is saying the same thing. Young institutions don't have senior researchers who can mentor them. And if they do, they have in a very unrelated fields who are there. So getting a mentorship from maybe somebody, let's talk of religion and business, the two have very little similarities. So you get very little mentorship on that side. That means that we need to have a pool of specialists in different fields in a central maybe data bank or database somewhere where we would know if I want to pick somebody from North Carolina, or there is Jessica from North Carolina University and she's in management sciences, and hi Jessica, how are you? This is Fozia, can we blah, 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 blah. We don't have that database. We don't have the mentorship program. And that also leaves us to the third thing, that most of the research calls that are coming in are multidisciplinary and multi-institutional, cross-cutting different continents. And because the database is unavailable, getting this information is not there, because we now have to use snowballing. Whom do you know? Whom do you know? And sometimes you find that the call would go away because you've not been able to meet your target or the person who would be in that particular area. So I'm not so sure how we can navigate that angle to see how best we can rope in everybody and it becomes a win-win. And then there are also very few calls on the business side in terms of the researchers that are research calls that are put out there. So that was the query I was asking. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nurwin. Jessica or Mumbi, do you want to expand about this topic?
Yeah, and thank you, Nurwin, for that. I think, again, as I was saying, you've really captured the issues well. You see the problem now, the broader issue is that we are having a kind of, I don't want to say a shift, but over time, what's happening is that more and more people are taking advanced degrees. So there's this kind of lag before we have a critical mass of researchers, especially locally and in some of the, the parts of Africa that have a lot of expertise, especially research experience in specific areas. So it's kind of like we are building capacity as we are working. But what I'll say is I've seen actually a lot of movement in doing what you've just said. So for example, there's Ashesi University in Ghana actually reached out to different schools, across Africa. They had a call and they are designing, or rather we are working on designing a program with different universities that will create this kind of platform. So it's more of learning from your peers, from other universities, opportunities for research, collaborations, and mentorship, which we really need, I agree, to help us grow. But the problem is that the critical mass is what we need to build. Although I would say, you know, again, countries are different. Because I find, for example, Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, there's a lot of, you know, very experienced researchers in that regard. So we are kind of trying to catch up, but it's a problem. So I think it's more of snowballing. But as we keep sharing, I think we'll see definitely more formalization over time in these networks being created. That's my perspective from what I've seen. I don't know what you think, Jessica.
Yes, thank you for sharing that, Mumbi. And I just want to say thank you, Norwin, for your question. I would just add that, you know, in the B Corp and B academics context, you know, we still are at that snowballing phase as you're describing. And our hope is that events like this, right, can help create some opportunities for connection, for collaboration. But I hear your call, right, and you're expressing a need for more formal structure, right, and more, you know, formalized networks, databases. And I think this is absolutely something that we can think about. What role can be academics play, right, beyond the work that we're already doing and pulling together convenings and trying to, you know, create that collaboration and connection. And I think as we're thinking about kind of next steps for B academics, I think this is a really important question for us to be thinking about and kind of our, you know, our specific niche area that we're working on. So thank you for raising, that issue.
Thank you, Jessica. We have 2 more questions. Just I wanted to say that this event is also helping in some way, to create these networks already. So it's a nice opportunity in this sense. Tatiana, do you want to share your question with us or comment?
Yeah, I think I'll start by saying thank you so much for this platform and the conversations that are going on. Maybe just some background. First, Mumbi was my lecturer, and everything she said was true. That was her teaching, so I do want to attest to that. I really appreciated your lectures. And I also did work for B Lab for quite a bit. So just some background to some of the comments I want to have. Thank you, Mumbi and Jessica, for the comments that you've shared. I think the first thing I wanted to say was, yes, incorporating teachings of sustainability and impact in the classroom, I really do believe is important. If we think about from when a child is in school to when they finish university, all technically they're taught is to kind of fend for themselves and how to earn profit. And if that is, you know, kind of the system that's ingrained from when you are born, and then all of a sudden now you have a business or you're working in an organization, and now you're being told, okay, now you need to be impactful and sustainable. Then the next question is, what does that mean? Where do I start? So having worked in BD, so many people ask, then what exactly does it mean to be sustainable? What does it mean to be impactful? We have small and medium businesses coming to ask, how do I calculate my carbon footprint? What is carbon footprint to begin with? So I really do believe that these conversations do need to begin from the classroom, or rather from when someone is much younger, so that by the time, and unfortunately for developing countries, I think the conversation has been there a bit longer in the West, but for developing countries, we are kind of fast tracking this knowledge system. And it's a bit tough, and it's tough, especially for the champions out there, to bring in this kind of awareness. So yes, it will absolutely help if it can be brought into class. Maybe what I would ask, and this is not an easy question, but who then can we hold accountable in universities to ensure that lecturers and academics are up to date with what they are teaching in the classroom? Again, maybe it's not a question that can be answered now, but just something to think about. And a lot of impact and sustainability you find is very self-initiative. So it needs to be your own self-initiative to learn about ESG, the different measures out there, because especially when it's a relatively new subject, being a champion kind of needs you to go beyond what is available. And it's a challenge to me too. I'm having to go back now to school and learn a bit more about ESG so that I'm able to give contextualized responses to especially small and medium businesses that are interested in this. Jessica, also, I just wanted to say great introduction. I'm having to rethink my introductions in my presentations, but great introduction. The B Impact teams is something that B Lab Africa is trying to introduce, and it will really benefit us. And maybe just to explain, and for the academics in the room, would love B Impact teams in your universities, wherever they are. The challenge we're having in Africa is we cannot reach as many people because the team and the champions are too few. So if we can get students and multiple students understanding what these concepts are and going to be champions in their own probably cities, schools, local communities, beyond just for instance, the B Lab Africa team majority of them are in Nairobi. So there's only so much you can do in Nairobi. We are trying to increase our B leaders. However, it would be much more beneficial and efficient if we do get students. So if we did have 1,000 students in Africa with the same message across LinkedIn, across Instagram, then we'll reach more people who will understand what it is. We'll have more companies getting interns to learn about B Impact assessment. And then the load would be removed from the few champions that are already there in Africa. So I would really encourage all lecturers, academics, kindly encourage it in your universities, and feel free to reach out to the B Lab Africa team to support you in that journey. And also, I believe, Jessica, you'd be able to support us in one way or another. Yeah, these are my comments.
Thank you, Tatiana. Do you want to comment something, Jessica, before giving Emmanuel the chance to share his questions?
Yes. Can I just say kudos to Mumbi. I mean, your student is so impressive. I am sure there are many, many more. You covered so many, I think, critical issues. I don't think I'm going to be able to respond to all of them, but I just want to say, I think experiential learning is one potential strategy to address that gap, right? How can we create more opportunities for students to get real world opportunities so they're better prepared, kind of whatever their background is, so they're better prepared to have an impact, right, once they go into the workforce. And then I also want to say what we're doing here with B Academics is very much a grassroots effort, right, to try to address that more systemic issue that you asked about accountability, right, that really needs to come from, administration, from a systems perspective, but we are working to really, drive that impact, share those best practices, collaboration, inform, right, and connect all the academics who are on this call, right, to do that work and to think about what role can we play in transforming, right, academia. And then I just want to also say, I would love to be a resource to B Lab Africa, and really anyone on this call where I can connect, learn from you, share what we're doing. So only a few, but thank you so much for those really insightful comments, and excited to continue the conversation after this session. I think that's what we're trying to do, is seed, right, these conversations, and then we think about where do we go from here. So I know, Veronica, you're a moderator. Tell us where.
Yeah, there is one more question. I will give the chance to Emmanuel. Just last question and we're over.
Yes, my question is to Mumbi. I was asking about how Absa Bank and SPS, Strathmore Business School internship program helps in the sustainability of supplier network, as in Absa Bank, and also how it helps in the 5 core modules, and also how the internship programs in the Strathmore Business School in the 4th year of study also works.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Emmanuel, and good to see you. So just to give a very brief overview, Absa Bank has a sustainability strategy that they launched in 2020. So as part of that strategy, they wanted to ensure that not just the internal stakeholders, but also their external stakeholders understand the strategy and also start to embed a sustainable business model. So they decided the first group of stakeholders to bring would be their suppliers. But as Tatiana has said, there's a lot of more or less awareness, literacy that needs to be created around how do you as a business embed a sustainability strategy. So that's where now Strathmore came in terms of, together with ABSA, by the way, and BLAB, designing the program. So understanding why is sustainability important, how do you measure impact, how do you communicate your sustainability strategy. So in fact, it's interesting because when I saw Jessica's program for the MBA, it's kind of a little bit similar to that, but then condensed. Then now the students come in to help them implement, because the thing is, you can't have faculty working for over 200 suppliers. The problem of scalability is there. So we also took the students through the program, and then they were attached to these companies as interns to help them implement elements from the training. So that's how we brought together the faculty, the students, and again, the organizations in the design of that program. But I'm happy to pick this conversation further to give you more information if it will help.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Emmanuel, Tatiana, Norwin, for your questions, and thank you so much, Mumbi and Jessica, for sharing your experiences. And now, Martina, I think we have to move forward.
Yes. Thank you. Now we can transition to the research session. And so Joe Gaiman will facilitate this part of the event. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's my pleasure to have 4 colleagues joining us today who are each going to make some short presentations about the work that they've been doing and hopefully spark some questions for all of you. And because we have such limited time, I'm going to have each of the panelists sort of introduce themselves as they speak. And the first panelist we're going to hear from is Eman. And he's going to sort of set a little bit of a frame. Then we'll go into 2 presentations that'll think about some methods-related issues. And then we'll close with some thoughts on impact and how we think about that. Is Aman in the audience? I don't know if I saw him yet today.
Yeah, I'm there. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I share?
Welcome.
Can you see my screen?
There we do.
Oh, lovely. Okay, yeah, thank you, everybody. It's good to see a lot of people here talking about issues that really concern us and issues that really concern the world, and especially important for Africa. So my name is Eamon Chizema. I am from Zimbabwe, and I am currently a professor at Loughborough University in England. So I'm going to try and give an overview of this topic from my understanding of it, but I'm focusing especially on big corporations, because my thinking is it's very easy to overlook these big corporations, who we do know that they still hold the vast majority of the resources, if you think about how they operate. So I think the question is, how do we get them on board? That's basically what I'm trying to talk about, and to look at this issue of social purpose as something that has been there before. So Joel, feel free to stop me wherever you think I should stop, because I may go on and on. So with that said, let me just look at the first slide there, social purpose on the scene. So the current situation is that we are not happy with the dominant logic of corporate governance. And the dominant logic being that we are made to take on board that maximization of shareholder value is the thing. That is the current dominant logic of corporate governance. But of course, the fact that we are all meeting today and talking about these things and saying, how can we move from here, suggests that we are not happy with that, and we are calling for alternative models of corporate governance, of how corporations should behave And herein comes the social purpose idea, which I'm saying here is not a new thing. It was there before. So we could spend the whole day talk about that in terms of the history of corporations, where they came from, how this whole problem of shareholder value maximization started. But I'm not going to go into that. So my focus then will be, the key question is, how can we get these big corporations adopt or embrace this reimagining logic of social purpose? And what sort of conditions should we look out for in our study of these corporations to really see whether they can actually come on board and adopt and embrace the logic of social purpose? Now, there's been some work that has been done by some very good scholars in the space of how old logics, which were there in the past, how they come back to take center stage again, and quite a number of them. And my favorite paper that I've read recently is one that talks about what is dead may never die. So it's a paper that was published in ASQ by these guys. They are a very tall paper, which suggests that some ideas may look like they're gone, but they stayed somewhere within the corporations. They lie idle, only to be reignited at some point. And they talk about regenerative institutional logics, which leads to institutional change, which, if you like, is a process that refers to shifts that occur due to the reemergence of logics that had previously experienced decline and decomposition due to modernization. So something comes, takes over, but again, look back in the history of those corporations, discover that they want to go back there again. So one way to do that, of course, is an approach to understand that would be to look at the history of corporations. And for some of you who really want to know how these corporations used to be like in the past, and how this whole idea of shareholder value maximization came on board, and to substitute what had been a good idea, I would recommend a book by Magnuson, which was published last year in 2022, titled A History of Corporations, a very good text that really traces the whole story of our corporations from Roman Empire to the current stage. But I would like to give you a brief history of the Cadbury, just in short, if time allows, so that we can get an appreciation of how to really understand the founders' history, their mission, and how to really dig into this past of corporations and see whether we can get something there which might invite them to accept the new logic. And I've chosen Cadbury because of two reasons. One being that it's a very good example that shows the idea of social purpose, but also secondly, because I understand it much better, because this company started somewhere very close to where I used to teach at the University of Birmingham, and they still have a strong association with the University of Birmingham. So the brief history of this company is that two brothers, George and Richard, took over from their father when he died at a stage when Cadbury was almost about to die. They did pioneer the extraction of cocoa butter and the elimination of additives from chocolate, and producing higher quality chocolate than their competitors at the time they started. And they built a factory just outside Birmingham in a place called Bonneville today. If you come to Birmingham, I would recommend that you visit this place. It's called the World of Cadbury, where they've got their museums and the whole history of where they came from. Just to give you an idea of their impact on society, they pursued several social welfare strategies for the workforce, starting with 200 houses that they built for their employees. And in 1904, the population they were accommodating was 2,600. But most importantly, their contribution to the welfare of workers actually led to the first British Town Planning Act of 1909, based on the work that they had done. They came up with Bonneville Village Trust, which boasted an estate of 7,000 houses, again, accommodating their workers. So we can see from this example, a case of a company that still talks about this. If you go to the University of Birmingham again, There is a lot of books and stuff that talks about the history of this corporation. And the point here being that, suppose at some point, if the workers at Cadbury lose their sight, they fail to realize the social purpose, how can they go back to understand who they were in the first instance and trace back their origins, start to do something right? And here is a case where they would look at their history, look at their historical artifacts, look at the founders' history, and try to trace back their origins in terms of what they stand for. So such a process would involve revisiting corporate history. It would incorporate the idea of rediscovering, recontextualizing, if you like, reclaiming and renewing, as well as re-embedding the forgotten or discarded organizational meanings and practices. So I know time is an issue. So the next bit I just want to talk about is there's a danger, though, that because corporations realize, the large ones, that there's so much to be gained from being associated with social purpose, there's a very strong danger that some of them will try to capture the whole agenda by reconnecting their past and claiming that they do have a history of caring. And here we talk about organizational identity, and there's a lot of work that has been done in the space of organizational memory. But what we learn from the literature on organizational memory is that sometimes managers, they select bits of the past, which makes sense for them, which creates a narrative for them to appear as if they are a caring organization. So therefore, it's very important to really look at such histories and understand very clearly whether these corporations mean what they say. And I suggest that there is a very big gap of research that can be done in that space. How am I doing, Joel, in terms of time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay, yeah. So I'll conclude with this then. So very briefly, I'm going to talk about several questions. And this is just a challenge to you guys in terms of the areas we can explore. And again, just remember what I said. Very small corporations which are coming with a B Corp, very good idea, but let's not forget the large corporations. If we leave this behind, especially for a place like Africa, that's where they still dominate. We should get them on board. So number of questions we can throw in the research area. Someone asked, how can we get into the space of research? Here are some of the questions. What drives these corporations to lose sight on social purpose, for example? If they started very well and then they lose it, what happens? Is it down to external forces, such as changes in legislation? Is it down to some dynamics within the environment? Or that is a question that is really worth pursuing. What drives these corporations to rediscover their past, their good past? What makes them think they should do that? How do leaders manage stakeholders in the face of a contestable organizational past? So you may have a case where one part of the stakeholder group is saying, you know what, the past was good. And another is saying, no, we were never good. And that contestable nature, how do you reconcile those two? How do managers deal with such a situation where that kind of situation arises? How much of the rhetorical past is used in the current narrative by corporations? How much of that do we hear? And what's the gap between what they say is the true story and what we actually see on the ground? I think we have seen this a lot. Corporations will claim we are ethical, we do the right things, and then the next thing you hear is scandal. There's been misallocation of funds, or financial reporting is not gone the way it should go. So again, that's a very important question to look at. But also, most importantly, what policies and strategies and leadership practices could help move corporations from a profit-only orientation to one that embraces social purpose? I think that is a very, very important question as well. What should be put in place from the government level? What should be put in place from the board level? And how should leaders of corporations really look at the idea of actually moving from a sense of just maximizing shareholder value to one where they embrace both profit making, but alongside the idea of recognizing that the cake that they make must be shared equally. Okay, I could go on and on with this type of questions, but I think I've just given you a sense of this direction to which we can go with this sort of work and to try to understand. And bearing in mind that what we see today is the new B corporation starting, before we know, they could lose sight of when they started and how they started. And therefore, it's very important to keep cognizance, to keep in mind how this can possibly go wrong. And when that goes wrong, how can they trace their way back? I think I'm done here, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So just for the audience, if you have questions as we're going, please put those in the chat. I'll be collecting them, but I want to first give each speaker a chance to present. Second, today we're going to hear from Judy Muthri from Nottingham University, and she's going to shift to starting to talk about some of the methods kinds of considerations.
Thank you so much, Joel. Amon, if you can unshare your slides, that would really help.
Well, let me do that. I'm just trying to work out the log. Yes, I just got the red part. Yeah, I should be fine now.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Judy.
So thank you everyone for this really great day, and thank you for the invitation. I'm not sure if you can see my slides and what you can see. You can see something?
Yes, we see them now. Perfect.
Okay, lovely. So I'm going to do something a little bit different, but really connecting what you guys have been speaking this morning. And I will be exploring participatory methodologies in business and society research. My slides are not really giving me a slide view, so my apologies. I don't know what's going on.
We see them in slide view. Do they work for you or not?
Okay, I'll just
yeah.
Okay, sorry. So I was just saying thank you for the invitation. I'm Judy, and I'm a Kenyan who is based at the University of Nottingham in the UK. I consider myself a business and society scholar, and so I'll be drawing a lot from my own experiences researching on sustainability and corporate social responsibility, and designing development-related interventions in Africa. So due to time, I won't go into the ontological and epistemological discussions around participatory inquiry, but I will really more or less move directly into introducing what it is and hopefully bring you along and champion this course that I'm on in terms of using this methodology within the co-creation framework. And I will also speak around, the challenges we encounter in this field and and the opportunities that these kind of methodologies present for you all, or for us all. So in terms of grand challenges, of course, we are, living in a world where there are numerous challenges, which due to their heterogeneity are so difficult to fully understand. And we as academics are invited to research and to contribute to addressing them. And as we all know, there's a call for more tailored solutions, which are centered on, stakeholder needs and, circumstances, which should be developed in collaboration with individuals. And this clamor for, co-creation, participatory engagement is growing louder by day as the world demands for equity. Likewise, we all know that, the kind of top-bottom approaches to development has not been working so well. And therefore, we need to address grand challenges, or the need to address grand challenges has been questioned from that perspective. And we are encouraging a lot of bottom-up approaches, to address these complex challenges. So I come from that perspective where, this question of involving end users, involving beneficiaries, involving stakeholders specifically the fringe stakeholders that, these big corporations are engaged, or, we are pushing them and demanding that they engage, and who traditionally, are left out, due to power imbalances and stuff like that. So we are pushing for that, and a lot of, there's a lot of interest from different quarters. Even research funding bodies and governing bodies are now, pushing for this notion of co-creation, so that we can have, solutions that are really inclusive and that are able to achieve, positive societal changes. So this whole idea and these phrases of co-creation, co-production, localized solutions are really, they speak to the engaged research agenda. And like I said earlier on, I hope by the end of this very short presentation, I will interest a lot of you to consider participatory methodologies as alternative ways of knowing and doing research, which is very different from the traditional quantitative and qualitative methodologies we are so used to. And so I want to also say that, they are quite good because they actually advocate, in ways that we engage those stakeholders that have less voice, that have less power. Think about the indigenous people and the very illiterate or semi-illiterate people, the women who are traditionally marginalized due to the cultures that we belong to, all these kind of people that are referred to as fringe stakeholders. So the big question in business and society research, how do we meaningfully engage, give voice, give power to this kind of stakeholders? So the big question is, that I want to leave you with is, how do we address societal challenges with local solution? How might we engage these people differently? And who are those actors, and what kind of research approaches that we might draw upon to bring all those people on board? So that's the background of this. And participatory methodology is very experiential. Jessica mentioned earlier on this notion of, experiential from a teaching perspective, and participatory worldview is that aspect of where we are co-constructing, co-creating our research agendas in mutually reinforcing partnerships. So action research is just one of them, which really is about designing interventions. But here we are talking about how do you actually bring these people on board throughout the entire research process. And it allows us to see, humans not just as respondents in research perspective, the way you go and you're saying, oh, my research respondents, in qualitative research was X, Y, Z. Here we are looking at them as partners, collaborators in the process of knowledge creation. So really, it's an umbrella term, if you may call it, to encapsulate all the research designs, methods, frameworks that we use to collaborate directly with those that are affected by the issues that we are studying. So it is very purposeful, and it's really a way for us to, for these ordinary people, ordinary stakeholders to play an active and instrumental role in our research. So how have I used some of these things? Like I said, there are so many participatory methodologies, but I will share just a little bit of examples of how I have used some of this. And the first one is cultural animation. So cultural animation, we've used it in order to, with artisanal miners in Kenya. And here we are developing interventions around, responsible and sustainable mining. using or engaging these mining stakeholders as key actors in this process. So we use songs, dance, role plays, boundary spanning object, as you can see there. That is them doing a stakeholder engagement and mapping, to look at who is powerful, who is doing what. The next bit we've also done is using GALS technique. And this one, we were using it to evaluate the impact of a big cocoa chocolate manufacturing company based in Ghana. And again, they had a project with women in the supply chain. And the big question is, how would you, engage women, and were this, project impactful? So again, because they are semi-illiterate and because of cultural differences, traditional interviews may not work for them. So again, that was very powerful. During coronavirus time, we were, and this project is still ongoing, working with young entrepreneurs in Kenya on how to create more sustainable enterprises. And here we used photo elicitation and reflection circles. And we also used appreciative inquiry in that process, where they analyzed their enterprises, but critically reflected around, the type of education they got and how that education, both formal and informal, has contributed and continues to contribute to the success of their enterprises, where the gaps are. And as a consequence, our partners, have been redesigning their curriculum, and we've used appreciative inquiry for that. And then I've also used many community. We are finishing.
One more minute? Yeah, perfect.
Yes, my time is telling me I have 1 more minute, so I have a timer with me here. So generally, what I would say is that we adopt participatory research across the entire, research process. And the issue is integrating, ensuring that we are integrating both researchers' theoretical and methodological expertise, importantly with the non-academic participants' real-world insider knowledge and lived experiences. And here I would just leave you with a few tips or some things that I would really love to share. Is that we know that action research or participatory methodologies may not be appropriate to all research that we all might engage with. So, but it is very, it offers really great opportunities for us to develop, to engage with different ways of knowing, different sources of knowledge, to have that deeper understanding and wealth, and draw on the wealth in the local context, even as we do our cases, as we teach and as we share knowledge globally. There are so many challenges, of course, associated for with this. And anyone who is interested, we can have conversations outside this forum, because I think there's a lot that can be said that I cannot definitely say within 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a fantastic introduction to participatory research. I want to continue with the theme of thinking about research methods and the ways that we engage with the field by turning the floor over to Ahmadine Bowman.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you also for having invited me to this great opportunity. Quickly to myself, my name is Ahmadine Bowman. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Bern here in Switzerland. And together with colleagues, we founded the Center for African Smart Public Value Governance. I'm coming to that during my presentation. So I think I just start in order not to lose time. So I'm gonna share my screen and trying to make it full screen. Okay, can you see that?
Perfect. Yeah, it looks good.
And does it turn the pages? That works. Perfect.
Yes. Yeah.
So I want to briefly introduce you our center, and from there an insight essay that we wrote together. The starting point actually was the pandemic. I think the pandemic has showed very well that solutions, approaches to tackle grand challenges that are adopted in the Western context do not necessarily work in other parts of the world. So let's take, for example, the example of home office practices that worked quite well in Europe, in North America. Many people could continue doing the work, but in countries where you have a lot of informal economy, like in South America, but also in Africa, this proved to be much more problematic. So on this basis, we also reflected about our own field, public management, where we can also see there are a lot of approaches like smart government or public value governance approaches that are developed often in North America, in Australia, in Europe, that are tried to kind of suggested to import them into an African context. And this quite unreflectively sometimes, and often solutions are then, or conclusions are that they do not necessarily work. There are certain institutional gaps that need to be re-established first in order to make this concept happen. Like smart government, that's the idea of introducing more technical tools, technical innovations in order to improve the public sector. Public value governance implies that different stakeholders should be on the table when developing public services and so on. So there are some ideas how this should be done. As said, often established in a Western context, and then sometimes the idea comes up to introduce them into an African context. So we questioned that and decided we want to have new answers on this approach, and with colleagues from Middlesex University Mauritius, Adila Kodabooks and Amar Siam, we founded during the pandemic years the Center for African Smart Public Value Governance that operate with CASP, with practically two aims. There's like one practical aim in which we say which we want to contribute to discussions on improving the quality of public governance approaches in Africa, but also a bit more a theoretical approach, as we're saying, because a lot of research is done in a Western context, as we believe if we can also do that more from an African perspective and from African perspectives, that allows us also to refine theory developments in organization studies, public management from a non-Western perspective. So this was a bit our starting point of establishing CASP, and we decided to run first some webinars in order to get some different inputs onto the core concepts of our center. So we invited people who talked about public value governance, about smart government, but also who got some better ideas on the African context. What does it mean? What do the concepts mean for an African context? And in the end, we kind of came up with three key insights that we tried to summarize. First of all, we realized, yes, this concept, smart government, public value governance, they are interesting approaches to tackle grand challenges. Of course, new technological tools can be helpful, can be interesting in order to find new ideas, in order to make things, finding solutions more efficient, also more effective, and so on. So when it's about creating a public service, offering via a web page, for example, can facilitate access and so on. And of course, it makes sense to integrate different stakeholders during a process. When establishing a public service, you get new perspectives, and that might help you to get more resilient solutions. Nevertheless, the webinars also highlighted that there are some local particularities that might have an impact on this implementing such smart public value governance solutions. Just to mention a few, when thinking about smart government, of course, the technical and ICT infrastructure is not all the same in all African countries. A lot of people use rather mobile phones instead of laptops or computers, as it is the case in Europe or North America. So that has implications when finding smart government solutions. But then also other aspects need to be considered. For example, that the public value or what the public is can be in an African context quite often also be more focused on an ethnical community, which is quite relevant in some African countries. But also what who relevant actors are can be quite different, because maybe in a European, American, North American context, the actors are much more formalized. It is much more clearer which actors are relevant throughout such a process. Whereas in African context, there can be landowners, important families, traditional families, who can be really important also during such a process, but are not listed somewhere officially. And so a final conclusion was also there's a really need to listen attentively to Africa and Africans. In that regard, not understanding that there might be some institutions, norms, or rules that are lacking in an African context, but rather seeing that there are institutions that are really important and also relevant in order to implement public services, but they might be different from a Western context. So just before somebody was talking about religion, that's definitely also is really important. That makes business running, that can be important also in a public service context. So that's really important to be aware of what is actually the context and what is relevant in an African context. So on this basis, we try to establish a research agenda to guide questions and future research on African perspectives for smart public value governance. Kind of some two guiding philosophies that were important in writing this research agenda, were the one formulated, for instance, by Felwine Sarr, who talks about Ufratopia, kind of saying if we want to find an utopia for Africa, we shouldn't think what Western utopias look like. We should go back into our histories, into our traditions, and up in these traditions establish an Afrotopia. But at the same time also, and we having kind of roots all in Mauritius, where creolization is an important phenomenon. So creolization understood as kind of bringing together different ideas, different cultures, and create something new, innovative. Up in this basis, we also say, well, as we've seen, smart public value governance can be interesting approaches, but maybe we need to contextualize them better to African perspectives. So on this basis, a way to move forward, we said, well, if somebody is interested in doing research that aims to have a public value or to understand how public value can be created in African context, I think three guiding questions, which are in the end quite simple, but are really relevant, should be asked, or should a scholar ask when starting a research project. So, for example, the first really simple question is, who are actually the relevant actors that need to be considered as the public in an African context? So I say that doesn't have to be necessarily the formal actors that are known from the public sector, or companies or whatever. That can be traditional families, that can be landowners and so on. which requires a really profound understanding on who are the relevant actors on the ground. And on this basis, it's important to understand what they consider as the public value and what they consider as problems, as grand challenges, not something that is formulated maybe in Western context. Is it also climate change that they consider as a grand challenge, but maybe it's something else? And so it's also kind of a listening attentively to them. And upon this basis, try to find out what are the smart mechanisms that they find in order to solve solutions for they considered problems, grand challenges in order to create public value. We see two approaches in order to answer these questions. The one is a people-oriented approach, and I think it goes back to a bit what has been said in the previous presentation. So it's really kind of going on the ground, doing a lot of ethnographic work also to really understand who are the people on the ground that are relevant, what are they consider as public value, and what they do in order to find solutions, smart solutions with the possibilities that they have to solve them. And another one is a concept-oriented approach, because we believe there are a lot of philosophies actually in Africa that already have this idea of creating public value in it. I think the most most known one is the Ubuntu philosophy. And so we also encourage scholars to understand how we can, how this philosophy can help already and give ideas in order to create public value and find smart mechanisms to create public value.
Ahmadine, 1 minute.
I'm coming to my last slide.
Last minute, yeah, okay.
In this regard also, some publicity, I admit, but an event that we have next week, which is exactly about African Ubuntu and Sustainable Development Goals, in which Dorin van Noren explains how the Sustainable Development Goals can be reinterpreted from an African Ubuntu philosophy. What does it mean exactly? And that it actually has another approach or a slightly different approach. So then up in this basis, understand how we can create public value from African philosophies that already exist. So thank you very much for listening, and looking forward to your questions or comments.
Thank you so much. I want to now invite Ralph Heyman to turn on his slides if he has any, and start his remarks, which will sort of try to round us out by thinking about impact of the work that we do.
Great, thanks so much, Joel. It's great to be here, and thank you for the invite. So yeah, I will just go to my slides very quickly. Let's see if I can share this. Here we go. Does that show okay on your screen? Just the slide, not the presented. Never know, yes. With real slides and so on. Anyway, so I'm going to speak to this the kind of overarching theme is this idea of seeking out opportunities for research on and with impact. I think there's quite a lot of connection to what Judy was talking about. And because the kind of tagline here is creating structured interactions with practitioners. And I just want to really use two research projects to share a little bit of our experience of how just how helpful it's been to have these structured interactions with companies, with managers. I mean, I have similar kind of experiences with community actors or social enterprises or community enterprises. So it's not necessarily corporate practitioners, but I'm going to focus on those for now, perhaps because that's particularly relevant for B Corp kind of community. So that the first project or the first kind of network and interaction with practitioners I want to mention is this thing called the Embedding Project, and it's been going for something like 15 years, but we have this group of companies, mostly Canadian and South African, but also there's one from the Emirates and one from Mauritius in there, and so it's been really very useful to have this long-term interaction with these companies, right? So one of the reasons is that they tell us about stuff that they are doing, which is really interesting from a practitioner point of view, from a policy point of view, in terms of responding to complex social ecological problems, and kind of working towards the SDGs and all of that, and in ways that we don't necessarily have good explanations for from the literature, from a theoretical point of view. So in other words, it gives us, it's like a space for conversation where research ideas and opportunities can come up, right? So one of them was where an insurance company was telling us about their problem of growing incidence and severity of flooding in a particular part of the country. And so they embarked on this learning process to say, to try to find out how are we going to respond to this challenge from a strategic point of view, because we can't do anything about climate change. So what are we going to do about this? And at the same time, there were other companies that are also doing quite interesting stuff, like a retailer, Woolworths in this case, that was saying to us, we are experiencing more and more severe droughts, and we are worried about the reliability of fresh produce production in our supply chain. And so we thought, hang on, this is really interesting. This seems to be of a kind of a tenor and content that is not all that well described in the academic literature. And so we thought, let's work with these companies and try to figure out why and how they were trying, they were actually doing this kind of stuff. And so, of course, I don't have time to go into details, but I just want to outline that kind of opportunity that came from a conversation, then also translated into an opportunity to actually work with those companies to collect data with those managers, but as well as a bunch of other stakeholders, municipal governments, NGOs, and so on. And so one of the outcomes was, an academic paper, which of course has the kind of theoretical framing and so on. But at the same time, we also then try to distill some of the insights for a practitioner audience, specifically for managers, and to basically give them a sense of how they could learn from these experiences in different kinds of contexts in trying to develop community resilience. And also then this is a guide that is available freely on our Embedding Project website. But then there's also, we wanted to try to get this out to a broader audience. And so there's a website called The Conversation, which I really recommend to all of you, both to read, but also to consider as an outlet, because we were able to basically translate the academic stuff into an 800-word op-ed style article that is, sometimes newspapers pick it up. And so this kind of reaches a much broader audience. So in other words, we've tried really hard to identify who are some of the different audiences and tried to adapt our arguments and also our writing style and all of that to communicate with those different audiences in order to, expand the reach and, if you will, the impact of our work. So I'm conscious, of course, that not everyone has an opportunity to work with an established network that's grown over a decade or two, right? So that we in some ways that's quite a luxury, not something that all researchers have. But I want to mention a second example where there's a more project-specific interaction that we could organize with practitioners. And this is actually a project that was funded by B Academics and B Lab and so on. And Judy was part of this. And so we decided, well, we want to talk to practitioners about this work to kind of validate some of our emerging findings and get some feedback and so on. So let's work with the United Nations Global Compact and specifically with 4 national Global Compact networks. And this was, I think, a really great event. We found it very valuable, and apparently the practitioners enjoyed it as well. And so it was also interesting. It was the first time that there was a Pan-African event of this nature across the different regions of Africa in terms of the Global Compact local network. So here's an example of being able, making use of existing networks like the UNGC to identify possibilities of connecting our research with practitioners who are grappling with this stuff, right? So again, I'm not going to dwell on the content so much. I mean, an academic paper came out of this quite recently in Business and Society. And then quite similarly, we also then had a conversation piece that tries to communicate to more of a lay audience, and, you know, perhaps some newspapers pick it up and so on. So just to conclude, I'm trying to be as quick as possible here. So I think it is important to think about the possibility of creating these structured interactions with practitioners, and that helps develop a research rationale that has both theoretical and practical ambitions, right? So I'm not of the persuasion that you have to choose between theory or practice. I do think it's possible to combine both ambitions in a particular research project or in a research career and so on. And I think these examples, yes, maybe they didn't land in AMJ, but, you know, who lands in AMJ anyway, right? So very few people get to do that, and I think they are still useful theoretical outcomes as well as practical outcomes from these projects. These structured interactions also help with collecting data and disseminating and applying the findings. So especially in terms of the management network, we were able to create a guide that is targeted to that audience. I want to just mention that so these are the two kind of ways of doing this. You can have a long-standing network that, you know, cuts across, that extends beyond a particular project, or you can have a project-specific interaction. And I mentioned examples of both of those. So I want to end off just by mentioning that these practitioners are actually really open to having such interactions. But at the same time, we need to understand where they're coming from. They really are not interested in the references as we are, you know, or the theories. They want to know, you know, how am I going to do something different on Monday morning when I'm back in the office? And if we recognize that context-specific set of motivations and circumstances that managers are facing, then we can design those interactions to make sure that, you know, they don't feel like they're wasting time because we're giving them lectures or because we don't understand what it is that they're trying to achieve, right? So I think it is really important to empathize in a way to understand what their kind of day job looks like, and how we can make those connections between what we're trying to achieve in terms of our research and what they need to do the next day in the office. So I'm going to maybe abuse also this opportunity to just mention an event in a year's time. In April 2024, we're going to have a conference, cross-sector social interactions conference. It's an international event, so please do consider coming down to Cape Town if you are able. I do think B Corp movement and B Academics has a lot to say in this conversation around cross-sector interactions. And you know, would be great to see some of you there. But basically, these are my key points, and I'll leave it at that. Joel, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Ralph. It was great. So we started just a couple of minutes late, so I'm going to take just a couple of extra minutes and see if we have questions from the audience that you'd like to pose to any of our speakers or all of them. You're welcome to just raise a hand or come on camera. While we wait for that, I thought maybe we could go back to the comment that was posted by Nerwin. It was earlier in the chat, and it was really asking about how to engage, you know, like-minded researchers and how to find, you know, I guess I think of it as finding your people. I wonder if any of you want to talk about sort of how you build your research collaborations and what, you know, do you want to, you know, would you invite junior scholars to reach out to you, and, you know, what would you say? Judy, Ralph, Ahmadine, Aman?
I can respond to that, but maybe someone, one of the others can go first.
Okay, so personally, I'm very open to new partnership and mentoring young or early career professionals, because I was also mentored. I know, like, for example, this is a real true story. Ralph, for example, we met when we were both doing PhDs early, was it 2005, Ralph? I can't remember. And we were both in the area of corporate social responsibility. And our relationship started from that time. He invited me to a conference he was hosting in Ghana. And with anything that has to do with Kenya, Ralph comes knocking. If I have something to do with South Africa, I go knocking on his door. And same to Amon and many other people. So it's about knowing what each one of us is doing and capitalizing on, our unique strengths in our different, areas, and just coming together to make a difference. So yeah, we are open.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that there is a lot of initiative at the moment on the continent about conferences. I know, for instance, we have been doing the Academy of International Business, the Africa chapter. There's also the Academy of Management, but called AFAM. I think Judy is one of the leading members of that. These are all very good initiatives where they are meant for you, I mean, for scholars on the continent. And on those occasions, there are a lot of very good scholars who come. We Africans who are in the diaspora, we are always there. There are the scholars. Actually, these conferences are attracting other people from other continents because of the impact that they're having. So I would say that's a very good starting point to go to those. I know it's a challenge for many institutions across the continent to have funding for that. But I also know that some of these conferences have some, is it allowances, Judy, where they sort of like help with some of that conference funding. So I would encourage you to go there. And it is in those places where you meet. I've met a lot of young scholars in those places. I continue to mentor right now. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any other questions from the audience? Want to come on camera?
There was a question from James in the chat. Shall I maybe respond to that? That was.
Oh, please, thank you. Yes, I just now see that. Thank you. That'd be great. Thank you.
So and I think thanks, James. I think that also connects to the previous question a little bit because I think I'm not sure whether this is what you're saying, but I think perhaps one implication is that it's more difficult for junior scholars to connect with practitioners than for senior scholars. And I think that might be the case. It might be useful to think about that a little bit more, but I think you're onto something there. And, I think it's perhaps also where your supervisor ideally would be of some help. So for example, in the embedding project, at least 3 of my PhD students have been quite active in that network, and they themselves have done their PhDs in collaboration with members of the embedding project, and that's also in conjunction with the co-supervisor who founded the embedding project in Canada. And so I think I would really, also try to, as part of that network building and community building that we just spoke about, I think perhaps identify these relationships with people that can help create that connection with practitioners, right? But that said, if you, some of my students, I think I must really just highlight that I'm really impressed how effective they are at networking themselves and creating relationships with practitioners. So many times they were much better than I've ever been at creating those connections. So and they were junior scholars, right? So I think it's not necessarily the case that you have to be a senior college scholar to do any of this.
Thank you very much. So just looking at the time, I'm going to go ahead and bring our session to a close there. But I think I speak for everyone. We're all available via email. So if you had a question and you didn't quite work up the courage to voice it here, feel free to reach out to any or all of us via email. We'd be happy to chat. And I'll just say personally, I hear from junior scholars pretty much weekly. I just had someone, I had a Zoom call this week talking about one of my papers that they were, that they wanted to engage with. I have a call next week about a different paper. So I would say if there are people that you find their research speaks to you, just email them. Probably they'll pay it forward in the same way that everyone in this panel has talked about. We all started somewhere, and we were all junior once. And you know, that's the beautiful thing, I think, about the research community. So with that, I'll turn it over, you know, to the overall moderation, and we'll get ready for our final session.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you to the speakers. So now we transition to the colloquium part. So I will open now the breakout rooms. We will have 4 main breakout rooms, each one assigned to a mentor. And in terms of coordination, let's say that the breakout room will last 40 minutes. So I will send a reminder 10 minutes earlier, and then 2 minutes before closing the breakout room, so we can coordinate remotely. Okay, so if breakout rooms work, because we had issues, okay, you can freely join them. I assign one which I will stay here. If you need to be moved from one room to another, I will allocate you without any problem. Thank you. Now we wait for
others to join.
Yes.
Okay.
Breakout room are closing, and so in a while everyone will be.
How is the weather in Italy?
I'm in Madrid, in Spain. And
Oh, yeah, in Spain. Yeah.
I had to close because there is a lot of sun.
Oh, it's fun. So you guys are okay. It's actually snowing. It's snowing here in England.
No,
we're shivering. You know, it's very cold.
This weekend it's forecasted 26 degrees Celsius.
I have to fly out there then.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, I think we are all back. Hopefully you had a fruitful conversation on research pieces submitted, and we have arrived to the end of our event. And so for the closing remarks, we have here Professor Ismail Atiyah, Director, the Office of Faculty Affairs at Strathmore University. And so thank you, Professor Atiyah, to be here. And I leave you the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. team. And my apologies, I was supposed to come for opening remarks, but there was an important milestone within the university where a professor who has been a VC for 20 years is handing over to the next VC. And since I've worked with him for almost 15 years, it's not an occasion, I cannot miss that occasion. So I had you in our minds too, as I was thinking about this. So I made sure that the moment the function was over, I could run and come around. But very, very quickly, we are very glad that this kind of seminar workshop is taking place. And I'm very, very thankful for the work that has been done a lot by Dr. Mumbi. She has been telling me a lot about you. I'm very happy to at least see you visually. But it's something that we have been working on from Office of Faculty Affairs. Now, very, very important, and that's why I like this linkage between Strathmore University and B Academics, because of Strathmore is an entrepreneurial university. So we cannot be in a scenario where we are forgetting about what is happening in the industry. And so in the big corporations that are involved in this, very, very thankful indeed. We are very, very grateful. And so it also helps in terms of aligning. So I was able to listen to about 2 or 3 presentations. I didn't ask any questions, but I was glad because there are some of my students, and I was very happy to hear some of the feedback that they were getting. So I'm sure I could say the same for all the other different groups. So very, very thankful indeed. And the theme of the university this year is sustainability, caring for people and planet. And so again, this is very, very related to what you are doing. And so, Strathmore University also is very much people-oriented. In fact, we call it people and culture instead of human resource, because we know we want to be at the heart of the people who actually lead. So very thankful indeed for you for supporting this. And we look forward to more engagements where you can have. And I'm sure from the group that we were in, there will be more, collaborations or more questions going back to, like, we had Professor Joel. Thank you very much. I listened to you responding to some of those questions, and I'm sure you'll be happy to respond to some of the issues that the students were raising, which is very good for us. I had the Office of Faculty Affairs, which is generally for faculty development. So anything that supports students, like doctoral students, where Dr. Mumbi is the head, is good for me, because it means that we can be able to develop faculty who are going to lead the entrepreneurial direction that Strathmore is going to take. So very grateful indeed, and look forward. I wish you maybe in future we can have time to physically maybe visit Strathmore so that we can engage much more on this. Now, the other part of the doctoral academy where Dr. Mumbi is basically was very instrumental in organizing this. But most important is ensuring that we train our faculty using the best human resource available. And this is where you come in. So very grateful indeed for that particular part. So on behalf of the university and of course on behalf of our department, thank you very much. We cannot thank you much more than this, but go ahead and please continue supporting our students. So we would like them to be as experts in your domains as you are currently. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Atiyah, and thank you very much to all participants, to Mumbi and Veronica for the organization, to our speakers and mentors for their availability. And I thank you and I welcome you to our next event. So stay tuned on behalf of all B academics. Thank you for sharing morning, afternoon with us today. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, professors, for their insights. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Martina.
Ciao, thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you,
Thank
Mumbi.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Martina.
Ciao, Joel. Thank you.
Okay. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks, Emmanuel,
Bye.
for the music.
The music was amazing. Ciao Marcella. We
Ciao,
speak,
Martina.
ci vediamo questi giorni. Ciao Mumbi.
Ciao,
Grazie.
Mumbi. Thank you.
Martina. Thank you so
you.
much, guys.
We keep in touch.
We will. Thank
Yes.
you.
If you want to come to Madrid, let me know and we can organize something.
You will find me there, Martina.
Okay.
Madrid is amazing. It's really amazing place.
So I hear. So I hear. No, I must come. So I will organize. You will find me there.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.